You're listening to Nutrition Matters Podcast with Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist. Hey everyone, it's Paige, your favorite nutrition podcaster and dietitian. Nutrition Matters Podcast explores what really matters in nutrition and health with a sensitive and realistic approach. This podcast relies on the support of listeners like you and needs donations to keep this project running. To help support the podcast, please consider making a donation at pagesmothersrd.com/podcast. If you find this episode interesting, engaging, or helpful in your life, please consider donating, sharing with friends and family, and leaving a review on iTunes. You can leave a review about this podcast straight from your podcast app. Search Nutrition Matters Podcast, click Reviews, and then write a review. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook at Paige Smathers RD if you'd like to have a little more food for thought. Thank you for listening. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Nutrition Matters Podcast. My name is Paige and I'm your host, and I'm so excited to bring you this conversation that I had with Crystal Thompson, who is a professional yoga therapist and an intersectional body positivity activist. Crystal's work focuses on helping people be in good relationships with their body while recognizing that there are systems of oppression working to undermine feelings of self-love and worthiness. Her work rests on the belief that all humans are worthy of love and respect. And as we do the work to feel better about ourselves and to better love and respect ourselves, we're able to offer more love and respect to the world. That's really kind of summarizes Crystal's approach to life and her just zest for this whole world of body positivity, body liberation, body trust. And I just had such a great time talking with her specifically about the practice of yoga and how that's affected her own life, both personally, and then also how it's been a great enhancement to her work professionally and also with the people that she loves most. So that's what we center our conversation around today, and it was such an enjoyable conversation. You're just going to love Crystal. And before we get into that, I'm just going to take a moment to make sure that all of you are aware of a few things. So the first thing is my online course, which is called Educate, Embrace, Empower: How to Unlock Your Inner Wisdom to Become Your Own Eating Expert. This is a 10-week online course that is designed to help bring you out of chronic dieting and just a chaotic relationship with food and into this world of being at peace in trusting your body and learning how to pay attention to it and listen to it and honor it through nutrition, through movement, through good self-care practices, as well as some kinder, more gentle ways to approach your body and your body image. And so this 10-week course has just been so much fun for my participants, and I highly recommend you check it out to see if it might be a good fit for you. You can access the course info page at pagesmothersrd.com/course, where you can learn more about the course, what to expect, what you get from it, as well as read some stories from people who have taken the course in the past. So check that out. And then also, if you haven't already, I would love it if you could leave an online review for me on iTunes, would be great. Also, Google Plus would also be awesome if you're able to do that, or even Facebook would be another way that you can leave a review for me. And please feel free to join us in the online Facebook group for the podcast. That's Nutrition Matters Podcast Study Group, and just request to join and be a part of the conversation. Okay, well, with that, let's get on with talking to Crystal Thompson about her story and as well as the idea of how practicing yoga enhances your ability to make peace with food in your body. Well, hi, Crystal. Welcome to Nutrition Matters Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Me too. I'm so excited to learn from you about all of your experiences, and also we're going to be focusing the conversation around yoga as well. And so I'm really excited to dive into that. I haven't had anyone on the podcast who we've talked about that explicitly yet. And so this is a topic that's untapped for the podcast so far, and it's a really important one. So let's just get into talking about kind of your life story, and I'd love to hear about any experiences that were really important to you in forming your current way that you approach life and your positivity around bodies and around the diverse shapes and sizes they come in, the diverse ways of life that people live in this world. And I would just love to hear more about how you came to that and what your experiences were that helped you formulate your paradigm.
Cool. Okay.
It's a very broad question, but let's just start there and then I'll ask questions along the way.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm like, okay, it's a big question.
That is
but
a big one.
I had thought about this recently because I was thinking about what are the foundations on which I rest my beliefs and my passions and my like my feeling around my purpose in my life and stuff like that. And I was looking back at like when maybe that started for me. And I was remembering that when I was about 10 years old, I remember a couple of things happening. When I was 10, I remember reading a book I probably shouldn't have been reading, which is like a romance novel that my grandmother had left somewhere. And I read this romance novel, and it was like about a white woman being with a black man. And it was like they couldn't be together. And because it was like, the 19 somethings, like early on, and they couldn't be together. And I read this book, and I remember making this very strong decision like that was the saddest thing I'd ever heard, because I was like, love is so important. And I think at that age, I already saw like that if we have love, for it not to be expressed, that is like just the saddest thing, because we just need more love. Like there's never not going to be enough love, or not going to be too much love, and that that to be in love and not be able to express it or share it. And so I remember at that age forming this decision that I was going to love whoever I was going to love. And I was like just 10, and I just was like, gender, race, background. I was just like, I'm going to love whoever I'm going to love. And, whatever, 10, that just happens. And of course, I don't really think about that again for a really long time. And the other thing that happened when I was 10 is I was definitely already really aware that there was different forms of injustice in our society, and that there were certain groups that had more privilege, and that humans might be doing some things that weren't good for the planet. And so I remember at 10, I wrote this like manifesto about all the things that I wanted to help make better in the world. And I wrote like this huge list of all the things that I was going to...
Where's that manifesto? No.
I don't have it anymore. Isn't that the sad thing?
You need...
Yeah.
Oh, if you ever find that, you need to scan it.
I can remember a couple of things though. Like I definitely remember... so this would have been like probably it would have been in the 80s. I would have been 10 in 1987. So I remember talking about whales. I remember talking about dolphins, saving the whales and the dolphins, being really worried about the ocean, being really worried about the rainforest. Really, really concerned about racism. And yeah, just wanting everyone to be able to have access to be able to love who they wanted to love. This is like 1987, and being worried about war, because I think it might have been soon after that the first Gulf War happened, and so being aware of these kind of things. And yeah, I wrote this huge manifesto, and I remember being so into it and so excited, and so excited to share it with my classmates, because I thought, hey, everybody, let's do this. Look at these things that we all probably feel that's wrong. Let's do something about it. And I remember most of my classmates being like, why are you so negative? Can't you see the good things in the world? And what's wrong with you? And I was like, oh, I totally. And I was like, I don't see it that way. I don't see it as me seeing. I thought of myself still as a really positive person that was being let's make more positive, not pointing out the negative. And as I remember, the three other kids in my school that were we get it. I was that's who I became friends with essentially. And I formed my first environmental club.
Oh my, that is a young budding activist at age 10. How adorable. That was in your bones, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think it was. I think this feeling of wanting seeing injustice and really feeling passionately moved to do something about it has been kind of like, yeah, a part of who I was from a really young age.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah. I love that. So how did things progress into your teenage years? I'd love to hear about like what it was like, with your relationship with your body, because we're going to be talking about bodies a lot in this episode. Like, did you have a transition in terms of like struggling and then finding this area of body positivity, or how was your relationship with food? Like, tell us about sort of teenage years, those formative years.
Yeah. So during my teenage years, things got really stressful, which is why I think I lost the manifesto, unfortunately, because my mom has really severe mental illness, and it was really abusive, and like so it was really, really a big struggle, and kind of mixed in with that, like because of my mom's abusive behavior, I developed really low self-esteem. And I was in a bigger body. And I think I was just when I was 10, I also went on my first diet from my doctor. And 10
was a big year for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, totally. 10 was like a huge year. I also got my period that year. Went on my first diet, wrote a manifesto, decided I was going to love
whoever. You know what? That's more than most people do in their whole life at age 10. Like, I love it. I wish true. I could have known 10-year-old Crystal.
Yeah, so I remember so my mom definitely played a role in like trying to control my food and trying to control my weight and that kind of stuff, and was not, probably not done from the most healthy of places because of her mental illness. And so through my teen years, things got quite bad with my mom, and definitely food was a source of soothing. Food was a source of refuge. And also, though, I was also like obsessed with like Shape magazine, and like would get every single Shape magazine and like only cook the healthiest. I was like always like looking for healthy recipes. I'd like be on the Stairmaster. It's like, the early 90s probably now. So that I was like on my Stairmaster like many times, like 45 minutes a day at least.
Did you have a neon sweatband though? Like,
yeah, totally.
I hope you did. Okay, good.
Yeah. Loved New Kids on the Block.
Love it.
Yeah. But and I was like super, super active. Like my dad was a tennis coach, and my dad and I would go on like mountain biking trips in Vermont, and or even like around the Toronto area where I grew up, and he also was like my basketball coach, so I played basketball. And then like my dad, I also was like definitely really aware about breaking gender stereotypes too. So I really wanted to play football because girls weren't supposed to play football. So I joined like my dad's adult league football.
Okay, and there's that activist in you coming out again, right? Like, heck no, I'm doing it the way I want to do it.
Yeah, you can't tell me what not to do. So, so I was like super physically active, but I also had super low self-esteem. And I was somebody whose body size is just bigger, like no matter what, like when I look back now, like back then, I think I probably would have been like, I must not be doing enough to eat healthy, and I must not be doing enough to move my body since I'm bigger bodied. But now when I look back, I'm like, oh my God, I was like the healthiest child ever. But so it was rough, and my self-esteem and my thinking around my body was, I think, really struggled and went through different periods of struggling. And, I think a lot of people talk about this, that like the process of body love, body acceptance, body neutrality is a journey, and that it's not a static one. It's not like we reach an end point and that never stops, because our bodies are constantly changing too. But so I think definitely now, what I like to think about it as is like if I'm over here in like body loathing, and then like over here is like body loving, and somewhere in here is like body neutrality, I spend much more time in the like positive loving place. And if I visit loathing and visit, hating my body, I don't spend very much time there. It's like a little visit, and then I go back to more neutral.
Crystal, that is so important.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I think that sometimes the message that gets internalized from the body, like from a normal, regular person walking down the street, from the body positive community, there's sort of this message or expectation of, well, if I'm positive about my body, then that is a static 100% all-in thing. And when the inevitable day where you're feeling discouraged comes around, or when you're feeling like you're just having some thoughts that you're kind of struggling with, there can be a sense of like this narrative of like, well, then I must not be doing body positivity correctly, Yeah. And I think that that's a really important thing to outline, is that it is not a destination. It's not somewhere you would just arrive one day, or even through many years of trying to get there. It is, I love the way you described it. Like I visit that, but then I spend most of my time here. I really relate to that as well. I think that that's a very good way to describe a very realistic sort of expectation of what body positivity looks like.
Absolutely. Because, a big thing, I think, that one of the reasons, like a fundamental reason that we can't expect that, is that our bodies are constantly changing. So we're probably going to feel differently about them. So we get illness, we recover, we gain weight, we lose weight, we get older, we get facial, marks and wrinkles and all these things that our society doesn't really want us to have happen, doesn't really want our bodies to do any of these changes, happens. And then we respond to that. And it's, I think I agree. I see that too in the body positivity movement. And I think the other thing that our society does too is puts this we can get this perfectionist. Like if I do this, they will apply that same method of like, if this is the method for me to feel better about my body, and I must not be doing it right if it doesn't happen. And we have this all in perfectionist mentality that we can apply to many parts of our lives. And then we just apply it to body positivity too.
Which is so funny, because the whole non-diet body positivity world or intention behind it is to reject that idea of perfection, right? And just to say maybe imperfection is exactly the way that life is supposed to be, and the pursuit of perfection is what's killing us.
Yes.
I just find it fascinating that we do that. We still that sort of reincarnates itself in other ways. When we're pursuing the opposite approach, we tend to kind of try to be so perfect at not dieting or at being positive about our bodies. And it's never the answer to completely reject something. It's always the answer to just how do I find this middle ground that's right for me? It's fascinating. I see it a lot right now. I think we're sort of trying to negotiate as a community and as sort of a world of people who care about these issues, or a community of people who care about these issues. We're trying to negotiate, wait, what are our norms? How do we want to exist as a group, or as a community, or as a movement? And I think we're still figuring that out. And the pendulum keeps swinging kind of back and forth, and slowly we'll settle into this great space. But right now it does feel like policing about your perfect or imperfect approach to positivity about your body sometimes, or even not dieting. So
totally.
Okay, so take us through. So lots of struggles as a teenager, it sounds like, with you had a great time with sports, and you loved being active, and you were a seemingly healthy, happy kid, but inside struggling with a lot of things at home and a lot of insecurities. Is that fair to say as a summary of what you've said so far?
Oh yeah, for sure. I definitely struggled with mental health. I did try to commit suicide when I was a teen. The pressure. I have a brother who's 12 years younger than me, and another brother who's 2 years younger than me, and I was responsible kind of for looking after both of them, because my parents got divorced, and then my mom was not capable, and so getting through high school was really hard for me. Except I also loved school, like loved school so much because it was like a safe space. I think for a lot of, I see it too, where I live in Northern Canada, for a lot of the Indigenous children too. It's like school can be a really safe space, where you know what the rules are and you know what's expected of you, when sometimes at home it can not feel like that.
Right.
So I loved school. And I just had it in my head too that I was going to go to university. So I was very dedicated to school. So that was like one place where I really did get a lot of self-esteem and sense of, encouragement, is from teachers and from like just my love of math and science.
Awesome.
So yeah. And then, but I still, like, I would say like even university, super struggled, like definitely experienced some of the things that people, a lot of people I know in bigger bodies talk about in terms of like actual, attacks for being in a bigger body, when walking down the street, when, trying to go about your daily life, having people yell things out of cars and throw things at you, and like just these weird things. You're just like, just trying to walk down the street.
That is so sad.
So like, yeah, that feeling of like just being visible in a bigger body sometimes can elicit for some people like violent reactions. It's really weird, except not, because our society really, that is one of the big reasons we need to like address fat phobia. It incites violence, and that's not okay.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that is for sure. That is so, yeah. For anyone listening who is not in a larger body and he might be hearing that for the first time, might be like, what? Like, does that really happen? Yeah. And I think it's really important to shed light on those types of issues, because for someone who's just living their everyday life and unaware of the abuses that people go through, I just think that that's an important thing to understand, the people in our lives who might be super traumatized and how that might show up in various ways in someone's life too.
For sure.
Ugh, that's so hard.
Yeah, and I like, just to bring it into like a sort of like movement piece. For me, when I walk down the street in a city, I feel much, much safer because my body is amongst city other bodies and on the street. And so I feel safer that my body won't be targeted. And when I'm in smaller places or places that involve like a lot of me walking down the street and there being a lot of traffic, just because a lot of the times things have happened where a car is passing and I'm walking and they've either yelled or stopped and said stuff or thrown things out me out of the cars, then that causes me much more anxiety. And still to this day, like I'm 40 years old, like the last time that really, I find as you age, in some ways it's like you become less visible. So it's like almost a good thing sometimes, but like, that it hasn't happened in a while. The last time it happened was probably when I was like 30, which I still like. When it happened when I was 30, I was like, I'm an adult now. I didn't think people were doing this to me anymore.
Oh, that is so sad.
Yeah. But I'm sure, kids are kids and they're still going to do like our teen boys mostly. But but I find that today, like it's easy for me to like in a city leave a building and like go outside and feel like I'm not going to be attacked. But when I live in a smaller place where there's cars going past, or like it's more of like a car culture kind of town or whatever, it's really hard for me to just like leave in a building and go and walk. And then what I lose is that movement piece, that in a city I can like go walk to the grocery store and I won't have to like get past the barriers of, okay, I know you're going to get triggered. I know you're going to have a lot of anxiety. Like, I won't have to get past that to like just get out of the house and move my body.
Yeah, that is such
I think that's another piece to be aware of when we're like, the safer we make the world for everybody, the healthier and happier everybody's going to be,
Yeah. And that's what we want, right? We want healthy, happy people, I mean, we're all going to get sick sometimes and we can't
Exactly.
control health, but like
Yeah.
we want healthy, happy people, and we need to just redefine what that means, because
Yeah.
you can't look at someone and know. And the treatment that you receive in a larger body definitely is not health promoting.
Yeah.
On a mental level, on a physical level,
Yeah.
on a spiritual, emotional, I mean,
Yeah.
any level. It's just that's definitely very hard and very damaging.
Yeah.
So Crystal, I'd love to hear about, how you found yoga. And like I hate to make this sound like you found body positivity and you're just la 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 now, but how did you make that turn, and how did you get through those difficult years? How did you start that process towards becoming a healthier, happier person in a way that's right for you?
So, well, one of the things that I did a lot when I just was obsessed with dance. So I was in dance all the time, and like from like 3 years old up until being a teen. And that's one of the things that happened too, I think, where didn't help my body image, because like dancers are meant to be so thin. And so I was like trying to fit into the dancer body. And so then I left dance behind because I was like, I can't do it because I don't have the right body type. And then I was in university, and the local YMCA was offering yoga classes, and I started taking them. And for me, it felt really, the biggest thing, I mean, it definitely felt very accessible for me because of coming from a dance background. So I think that I had a little bit, it made it a little bit more easy to come into a yoga practice, especially in the West. Yoga is like so focused on the postures, the asanas, that it kind of, it's getting a little bit better. I see a little bit of a shift, but this would have been like 1997. And definitely I felt like back then it was like very much asana focused, posture focused. And so it was like very much, if you were flexible already and had a lot of body awareness already, yoga was quite accessible, a typical yoga class. So I started going, but then what happened was, it was really the mental health benefits, because I was in university at the time and things were still pretty stressful with like family life and stuff like that. And I really needed some help. Like I'd already been in like therapy, like counseling since I was like 18, but just getting some other sort of like strategies, coping strategies that I could do on my own, that was like super helpful from yoga. And so it started in 1997 as like a personal practice, definitely with that, and I was drawn to it because of the mental health benefits. And then I was in about 2008, I was like, 2008 was like kind of this like real big tipping point for me, because I unfortunately was like super not body positive that year. But it's almost like my rock bottom almost. So it's like I was like, I just come off of a period of devoting myself fully to looking after my youngest sibling, and really my own health had really suffered. And so I came out of that and I was like, I'm going to look after myself and I'm going to kick my body in its butt and I'm going to fix it. Like, and that language even tells you it's like not a loving approach. It was
Totally.
like, kick this body in its butt. And so I started seeing like naturopathic doctors. I started seeing a personal trainer. I was like, super restricting my diet, both because of the personal trainer and the naturopathic doctor. Just started to try to do everything I possibly could to finally lose weight, because I would always, and I think this is partially the fault of our medical philosophy. Everything was my weight's fault. any health issue I had. It was because of my weight, right? Like my skin would clear up if I lost weight, like my menstrual cycle would be normal if I lost weight. Like all these things were like my hormones were the problem. So if I lose weight, then my hormones will be more balanced, like all that stuff. So I really, and so then I could come at it from, it's not a body image thing, it's a health thing too. Like that's the other kind of, kind of like subtle, insidious thing that happens where it's like, oh, this is for health, not for punishment, even though I think it really was like, again, kick my body in its ass. So I think it really was kind of for punishment. And so I spent like a year and a bit throwing myself into that and like super restricting my life like narrowed down. At the time I was like loving going like on canoe trips, and like it made it so hard for me to like plan all my meals, know how many calories I'm burning on my canoe trips, know how many calories I'm consuming on my canoe trip, like all that stuff, and being like, oh, you guys bring this food for yourselves and I'll bring this food for me because I can't eat those things, and all that stuff. So super restricting my life. And at the end of that, like sort of, I think it was like at least a year. At the end of that year, I had lost 2 pounds. And I remember my personal trainer being like, I'm sure you've lost more in like body fat. And I was just like, this can't be. I'm done. Like I have given and given, like I put it all into this. Like I did everything that I was supposed to do for a year, and it has sucked. And I've lost 2 pounds. Like I can't do this. So I remember I drove out to a river outside of town, and like was just so devastated. And I just like screamed at this river and was like, I hit that bottom where I was like, that saying about, if we keep doing the things the way we've always done them, we can't expect a different result. I was like, I guess it was like that super scary unknown, which I think a lot of people can identify with when they hear about not dieting anymore, because everyone's like, what, I've been doing it, and like I have to, if I don't, I'm gonna like balloon up, and like, like I'm sure you hear that a lot too. But yeah, like, so I was super scared, but I was like, I think I have to do something different. And right around that time, one of my friends said to me, she was like, Louise Hay says the only diet one should ever go on is a diet from negative self-talk. And I was like, just like, it just kind of hit me right at the right moment. I was like, interesting. Maybe loving myself might be a better option. Like maybe just sending myself love could be a better option, because it really had not been coming from a loving place. So yeah, I decided to like let go of all the food restriction I'd been doing, which was super hard. I was like, and to that same friend, I was like, I'm just going to eat ice cream all day long. And she's just not a coach.
As a fear of like, oh, if I stop dieting, what will I do? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And she's not like a coach or a dietitian or anything. She's a librarian. She's like,
librarians are really smart. I have a few. Yeah, they are brilliant people.
Yeah, I agree. So she was just like, I think you might, because you've been restricting for so long. But she's like, I also know you, and I know you like to eat a variety of foods, and I'm sure it'll come back to you eating the variety of foods. And if in the beginning you just eat ice cream by the bucketful all day long, then that's what you do. And I was like, interesting. So I did that, and it was around that same time I'd been practicing yoga continuously, and it was around that same time that I was like, I think I want to go further and deeper into yoga, because yoga is really helping my mental health, and I want to learn more about the philosophy and just actually study it. And so I said to my yoga instructor at the time, I was like, I'd like to go on yoga teacher training. But I like legitimately said to her, I know I'll have to lose weight. Like it was like that whole thing of like, I'm apologizing for it before you tell me I have to lose weight. I'm going to like make sure I know I'm fat, So I said, I'd like to go on yoga teacher training, and I know I need to lose weight. And she looked at me like, that's not a thing. Like,
Good for
she's
her.
yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah. Super, super awesome. She was like, that's not a thing. That's, she was like, I actually think you'd be an amazing yoga instructor. And, but she also said, you need to practice yoga on your own 3 times a week, at least for a year. And she's like, just to get a solid personal practice down before you go on the yoga teacher training so that you can get the most out of your yoga teacher training. And I thought that was also really excellent advice.
Okay, I really want to hear the chronology of your story, but I also really want to highlight a few things that you said so far. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so when you talk about being very drawn to yoga, I really want to dive into why. Like, what specifically were you getting from yoga on like a mental health perspective? Like, I know people like throw that out there and say that,
Yes. Yeah.
but I don't think every person gets it. I think some people listening might be like, okay, what is she talking about? Like, how could that possibly do that for you? So let's just dive into that for a second, and then I want to get back to hearing the story. Does that sound good?
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
So like specific benefits, like what were you learning? What was beneficial for you?
I had so much internalized hatred, self-hatred, that I think it made me an angrier person in the world. And although I think I also am friendly and all that, but I felt that the world was judging me so much that I would feel angry like a lot of the time. And the big thing for me is that I would have my yoga practice and I would do asana. So the yoga postures, the asanas, were developed as a way for the yogi sages to be able to sit in meditation longer and more comfortably. Because if they stretched out and moved their bodies a bit first, then they sat in meditation, they could sit there longer. And then that meant that they were more likely to reach these states of nirvana. So, and reach enlightenment. So I would do an asana practice and then I would sit in meditation. And these moments of sitting in meditation, they felt like that state. I think that we all want like this bliss, but that's not a bliss of like a ecstasy or, even joy or happiness. It's just
Stillness,
contentment, as if the world anything could happen and it can flow through you, that you're not going to hold on to attachment to the things that are happening. And they could be good things, they could be not so positive things, and you would be able to flow with life. And I remember like sitting, having these moments of meditation, and I would do my practice in the morning so that I'd have to like go to work. So I'd have to stop meditating eventually. And when the alarm would go off that I'd have to stop meditating, I remember feeling like just I could have stayed there forever, because in those moments I just felt like it sounds weird, but like I was only goodness. I was only existing in good in the world. Like, and that my energy was in connection with the rest of it is all the things that people kind of say. And I like about yoga, like it creates a sense of oneness. It creates a sense of like connection with others. And I mean, that is the fundamental philosophy of yoga too, is that separation is what causes disease in the body. And separation is what causes disease for humans. And that when we see that all is one and that we see that all is connected, when we come from that perspective with our bodies, with each other, then we can exist more healthfully. And I do think that was what I was experiencing in those moments, is that this pure connection with myself, and like just existing in the body I have right now. This is just this body. Like that's all it is. There's no good, bad. It's not beautiful. It's not ugly. It's just this vessel that I'm experiencing life in.
Totally.
And
I love that.
Yeah.
I love everything you're saying. I think that is such a beautiful summary of the experience one can have that's positive with yoga. And I would also add that the way I kind of see yoga, and also even working on our relationship with food, kind of like my realm, what I do, I think that these things are physical things that we can do with our bodies that can teach us abstract truths that are very hard to learn without a physical thing to do to learn them, right? So we can learn about kindness and gentleness on an abstract level and say, oh, that sounds nice, but then does it resonate? Does it become a part of like our soul and our being? But when you learn that, oh my, I am being so mean to myself about food, and I'm going to quiet that voice, and I'm going to be gentle with myself, and I'm going to focus my efforts towards just taking good care of myself, and regardless of what my body does, just take good care of myself. You learn through a physical act that you're capable of doing that, and you see how much beauty can come out of life when you do that. I think yoga is very similar. It teaches you that with patience and consistency and effort, you can see your body do amazing things that it couldn't do last week. But you can also learn that Thursday is very different from Tuesday, and it's not anything you're doing wrong. It is what it is. And you learn to make peace with that, and you learn to try to not compare, and you learn to be still, and you learn to balance, like physically balance yourself in a posture that then teaches you an abstract truth about balance in life, And
absolutely. There's so much.
It's like mind-blowing. It's so cool.
Then there's also the flow, to be in flow. Then there's also, like, whenever I teach a very asana focused class too, I will focus on the, like, kind of like exactly what you're saying, like sort of a more of a fundamental truth. So when we do back bends, we're moving into the unknown, we're moving into the unseen, and this can cause fear to arise. And so to be able to move and trust our bodies to move backwards into the unknown, we need to get very physically grounded to the earth, feel the support of the earth, physically strong in our own core. And so feel like, and by core, I mean like just your center of your being in your body. And then you're able to like move back into the unknown. And from that first, that grounding and that inner strength. And it's the same like for like something like a handstand or an inversion. Like there's so many ways to like bring more like these big truths for life into like it's layered in there in the asana practice too.
Well, and it what it does too is it sets the precedent. You practice yoga and you practice, I am getting stressed out, I'm really in pain with this, maybe like my body is sending me some signals, and I'm going to breathe through it, or I'm going to adjust, or I'm going to move out of that so deeply, or whatever. Like you learn how important the breath is to help calm you and ground you. You learn that even just tweaking like where your pinky toe might be might help you feel a whole lot more in balance. You learn that letting go of judgment can create all of this space to do amazing things with your body. And it's just, I just wanted to highlight that as, yoga sometimes I feel like culturally it's sort of been this like latest fitness trend, and like you're going to get such fit muscles if you do it, and you're gonna alter your body and manipulate it through yoga. And I feel like it's gotten a little bit of that vibe and culture around it. But I think for the person who's thinking like, is yoga for me? What could I possibly get out of it? Like I'm uncomfortable in tight spandex around a bunch of other people. Like I totally get that, but like that's not really what it is or what it's for. And
it's so unfortunate. Yeah, and because like yoga has really been yoga was brought to the West as an offering from yogis, and it was kind of with the idea that like this is going to help North America, this is going to help the West and Europe, and it's been taken and commercialized and really made more physical. There's this really great book called, I think it's called Yoga Body, and it kind of goes through that history of how yoga has become what it is in the West right now. And and it's very much more physical. It's not about the philosophy of yoga as much, and it's been turned into something that can be now talked about how you're going to get a better butt or how you're going to lose weight. And like when I hear that, it's like that's like saying, and yoga is not a religion, but that's like saying going to church is going to help you to get a bigger butt. Like this is like, or bigger butt, better butt. I don't know, whatever people want.
Yeah, whatever your form of better is, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like, I mean, and what I like to bring up too, in terms of yoga philosophy is that, and what I think, one of the ways I think yoga philosophy fits so well with body love, body acceptance, so well. But so yoga has 8 limbs, according to Patanjali, and the very first 2 limbs are the yamas and the niyamas, sort of like ethical guidelines of like how to live your life. And the very first of those is this term ahimsa, which you may or may not heard before. It gets translated into English as nonviolence sometimes, or it can also be because that A is a negating in Sanskrit. So ahimsa means like non-violence. The A is the non. So it gets translated into non-violence, but one of the ways it can be positively translated is compassion. And so when we think about living with compassion, living with ahimsa, we need to apply that to ourselves and to our own internal thoughts as well. And so I like to bring that up in classes and bring it back to part of the yoga philosophy is also practicing with compassion to yourself. Like if your yoga doesn't include that, you're missing the very first limb of yoga. Like that I think is key. Like you might be able to do lots of other stuff in yoga without having that foundation of compassion, but in the 8 limbs of Patanjali, it starts with that. It starts with compassion. And if you don't include yourself in that compassion, then your compassion is missing a really big component.
Yeah, that's such an important thing. And that's a really good way to connect it back to my original question, which was like, why was this helping your mental health? Why was this teaching you things that were really beneficial for you? And I would say that that's a really good place to start. Like self-compassion is sometimes seen as like, giving up or letting go or not trying hard enough, but really like it opens the door to all kinds of beauty and wisdom of taking good care of yourself and living the life you want to live. It's so much easier to do that when you're being kind to yourself than when you're being a bully to yourself, Well,
because and ultimately, like when one is attempting to even practice compassion, it opens, even just the attempt of it opens up that door to listening to your body and listening to what your body's needs are. So if you're doing a yoga asana practice with ahimsa or compassion, you're going to be like, is this the best thing for my body right now? Or maybe I need to adjust in this way. Or when you're like, even like this does not need to happen just on a yoga mat, right? Like yoga can be practiced all day long, anywhere you are. When you're feeling hungry, what would be the most compassionate, what would be the most ahimsa-based practice from your, does my body need something crunchy? Does my body need something really a substantial meal? Am I feeling like, I need more water? Am I feeling like you can tap into that internal wisdom when one practice starts to come at it from a place of compassion?
Totally. Oh, this is exactly what I wanted to get at. This is such an important conversation about the beauties of the practice of yoga when done, with some of these kind of foundational principles in place, like compassion. Anything else you'd say about your yoga practice and how that's brought good things into your life?
I think the other things too is like just to touch on too, the breath. I think that one was like also just so key, like you mentioned it, but it's like, just this breath can get us through so much and can be such a powerful way to process emotion, way to process discomfort, way to even stretch and move. Like, so sometimes people, will say to me, I can't do yoga. And I understand exactly why, because of what it looks like in our culture, what the typical yoga class will look like. But if one can breathe, one can be practicing yoga. And, I have worked with people in palliative care. I trained as a yoga therapist, and shortly after my yoga therapy training, my cousin, who is like my sister, she's the same age as me, she was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, and she passed away 8 months after her diagnosis. And so she was, she had the bone marrow transplant, she did all the big chemotherapy, and so she spent a lot of time like in the hospital, laying in bed and not well. And we would do yoga together. And I would go into the hospital. I would use my awareness of the body and supporting the body. I would put her in restorative yoga postures in the bed. I would do guided relaxations with her. I would do breath work with her. I would do yoga nidra, which is like one of my favorite practices of all that's out there in terms of what yoga offers. So yoga nidra translates into English as yogic sleep, and it kind of helps take the brain into the state of hovering between being awake and being asleep. And my cousin even said to me that was like, I would do like 3-hour long yoga nidra practices with her. And she said that was like one of the few times where she really wasn't in pain, and she would just like want me to stay there and just keep talking. And yeah.
I'm tearing up a little. That's such a beautiful story.
Oh, yeah. I remember she even said to me, like, yeah, I'm going to cry too, but she said to me, like, do you think this is why you did your yoga therapy training? Because it happened a year after I did the training. And I was just like, I don't think I would have known how to help her as much as I did. Not that, of course, I wish I could have helped her. So,
but you brought her peace in a time of pain and so much suffering and so much, I'm sure, just stress and worry and all of the things. That's a beautiful gift.
Yeah, I was really happy to be able to at least offer that to her, because she was in Toronto too and I was in Yellowknife, so I didn't get to couldn't be there for her as much as I wish I could have. And at least when I was there, I was able to, even also just to use my own yoga training to help myself stay centered and calm when so much was going on in the hospital and stuff, and emotions are running really high amongst family members, of course, and all that stuff. So, So I when I think about people talking about saying that they can't practice yoga, it makes me sad to think of what a disservice our culture has done in terms of watering down what yoga really is and how all the benefits that yoga really has to offer, because it has so much more to offer than what gets promoted out there. And like, when you look at that, like, one of the people I've studied with, like, she's worked with people, who are terminally ill with cancer. And like, I got that idea to use yoga nidra because this woman has worked with people who are terminally ill with cancer and done yoga nidra with them, and she said this thing to me once. She was like, they weren't cured, but they were healed. So they still passed away. The woman she was working with at the time had pancreatic cancer, and so she did yoga nidra with her, and she said, I felt healing happen. And she still passed away, but it's that idea that just being at peace with what is, and letting go of attachment a little bit to like just be with what is, and finding that contentment in that moment, which is really hard to do when you're in a lot of pain and faced with your own death.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't get much harder than that.
Yeah.
That is such a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that with me.
Yeah, actually, I've never shared that before.
That's powerful. I mean, that's a really powerful illustration of just how narrow our view of yoga tends to be, where it's this get your spandex on and go compete with the other housewives and like it can feel like looking in the mirror and comparing and trying to get so fit, but that's really not what it is. And there's so much more to it. And there's so many more applications. I mean, I didn't even know about the idea of that in palliative care. That's really, really interesting and really cool.
Yeah, like the yoga therapy as a profession is, I know in the United States, they're looking at making it more of a licensed profession. So it would be more like a massage therapist licensing. And so you'd have to have a certain number of hours of training, more than the typical like 200-hour yoga teacher training. And I know from so I did yoga therapy training in the United States as well. And I know a lot of the people that I studied with that were in my class or whatever, they have gone on to work in hospitals and mental health institutions, because some hospitals and mental health institutions are starting to see the benefit of a yoga therapist being present even on staff in hospitals. It's
evidence-based. I mean, there's a lot of research supporting. It's not out there. It's definitely validated through science.
Absolutely.
And also anecdotally, right? I mean, I think anyone who really gets into a practice with it can speak to its benefits in their own life. Yeah. Okay, Crystal, just tell us more about what you're up to these days. And, so did the yoga teacher training, started a yoga studio at some point, right?
Yep.
Still doing that? Is it still up and running?
My studio is still up and running. However, I'm in the process of, life is changing, of course. And so currently, really working to support my partner, who's, on the road a lot as a touring musician. And so probably going to be letting go of the actual space studio. But these days... So I've been offering yoga in Yellowknife in classes, and also as a private yoga therapist in Yellowknife, and then I also offer some stuff online, and I think I'm going to move more in that direction. And my work in yoga has always been around body positive yoga and a yoga that's for all people. And I think going back, I remember you asking me. Oh yeah, this was we were talking before, but just I've noticed that when one makes yoga accessible for the most marginalized groups in our society, then you have people who you didn't necessarily think of the thinner, white, affluent woman when you were making this space super accessible, but what I found is that then it makes it feel safe for everybody, because you've made it feel safe for the people who feel the least safe in our society. Then it makes the space feel safe for all the people. Because also the other thing is we look at people and we don't even know the trauma that they were walking around with. We don't even, we can assume that that's not what's going on, but so many people were walking around with these hidden traumas. And when we create a safe space by even thinking of those most marginalized groups, then those people with those hidden traumas feel safe too. And I think that's been something that's been super important to me in creating yoga spaces, is to try to make them feel as safe as possible. And the creation of safe space has been something that's been definitely on my mind. So I've started more working again in schools these days too, to also help schools create safer spaces, and drawing on my yoga background, but just talking generally, how do we create safe space? How do we create a space that's welcoming for everybody?
That's such important work.
Yeah.
So tell people how they can get in touch with you and follow you on social media or wherever. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. My website is www.thelusciouslife.ca. And
I'll link to that.
Yeah, awesome. And then And then on there, you can sign up for my newsletter so you can stay in touch with me that way. And you'll get a yoga practice and meditation as well by signing up for the newsletter. And then I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/thelusciouslife. And then I am also on Instagram at Crystal's Luscious Life. And I'm on other social media, but those are the ones I use the most.
Awesome. That sounds so great. I've really loved this conversation about your story, and also about yoga. I really think that this is going to be helpful for people to just maybe dip their toe in it and see if it's right for them, and see if they can learn some really beautiful, abstract, out there truths on a very real and practical level through practicing yoga, or through working on body positivity, or working on being more in touch with their body through intuitive eating. This is why I think this work is meaningful, is because we can learn those things through physical things that we talk about on this podcast and that we experience every day. And you learn something differently when it's something that really resonates in your soul. And it's hard to do that when someone just tells you something. It's a lot easier when you do something, or when you work it out yourself. And so I think that's the beauty of yoga. And I'm hoping that we did it justice by talking about it today. Did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I feel like it was like such a great conversation about yoga. We got at things I think most people aren't talking about when they talk about yoga. And the thing I would say for anyone who's listening, who's like kind of like afraid about starting a yoga practice, or afraid about joining yoga, or thinks it's not for them, definitely really look into like your teacher beforehand, because it's really very specific to the teacher. If you find a teacher who's works for you, then I feel like you'll feel like yoga is for you.
Yeah, it can make a big
it's all
difference.
about finding that right teacher, and somebody, hopefully somebody who's body positive, somebody who's has an awareness of anatomy, like, a little bit more than what is offered in a 200-hour yoga teacher training, and somebody who's like thought about how to modify poses for all the different bodies that can be in a room with injuries, or in different body shapes and sizes and disabilities and all those things. You want somebody who's really thoughtful and thought that through. And so there is the Curvy Yoga has a list of some of the places you can find curvy yoga instructors. So those would be yoga instructors that have learned more around how to modify for a bigger body. And I can't think of a good resource for just generally, but hopefully I'm going to start something like that soon for the Canadians out there, of where we can find body positive resources across Canada is kind of my goals, to start something up like that, just so that we can all connect with each other. And when we move to a new city, that's where I can find the Hayes, dietitian, the healthy at every size dietitian, or the non-diet dietitian, or this is where I can find the body positive yoga instructor, or the body positive fitness instructor. I think that would be so great.
Oh, yes. And we need more of you. So if you're out there listening and you're like, I might want to change my career, do it, because we need you. Well, Crystal, thank you so much for talking with me today. This has been just such a delightful conversation. I've learned a lot, and I'm so excited for the things to come for you. So keep us updated, okay?
Awesome, I will. Thank you.
Well, I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you haven't already, please go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks again so much for listening, and we'll see you soon for another episode.